Welcome back, Alex.
I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's only been a few weeks, but I don't know about you, but it feels like it's been a lot longer since the last time we chatted.
A lot of things have happened. Yeah.
Is it fair? Is it safe to say that some things are changing in the world right now?
I think that it's safe to say that with some caution,
Hmm.
that it seems like we're on the precipice of a lot of change, but the jury is still out whether or not those changes happen.
Cautious optimism, yes?
Yeah.
Would you say that your podcast was the catalyst for all of this change?
So I solved racism a few years ago, really, but then it keeps coming up in spurts, and then like we had our podcast, and then like we solved it again when we talked. So I assume we'll just solve it again today.
Welcome to Sketchbook Podcast, a discussion about creativity, preparation, and effort with artists, creators, and educators. As always, I'm your host, Daniel Montoya Jr., and for the first time in Sketchbook history, we have a part two where I invited a guest back because we needed to talk more about this. It wasn't like we cut an episode into two parts. So, Alex Blue, welcome back. For those that are just tuning in for the first time, and if they didn't listen to your episode, why not? Can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, and maybe what your favorite shoe is?
Sure. So again, I'm Alex Blue the fifth. I am currently finishing my dissertation in ethnomusicology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. I'm currently employed as the Thurgood Marshall Fellow in African and African American Studies at Dartmouth College. Starting in fall 2021, I'll be employed as assistant professor of music at College of William and Mary. My favorite shoe at the moment is actually a shoe I'm wearing, which is just contextually important to me. It's the Puma Ralph Sampson Black History Month edition.
Oh, all right. I can dig it. I can dig it. Now, we are recording this today, Juneteenth of 2020. This will be released later today, Juneteenth of 2020. I think it would just kind of be like the day that worked out, and then it was like, oh wait, that's Juneteenth. So here we go. We're not going to pull punches. In the interest of full disclosure for all the listeners, I did send you sort of the bullet points that we were going to talk about, so that you would feel a little bit more prepared for these questions or these discussion points. And as I mentioned, none of these were sent to me in any sort of negative fashion. It was more curiosity and just like, well, what about this? Or did you think about this? And honestly, a lot of it came from a place of how can we help? And, when we recorded this, they had, correct me if I'm wrong, it had just been the Ahmaud Arbery murder, right?
That's correct.
We hadn't got to the George Floyd murder. That was, I feel like, days. It was days before your podcast release. I don't know the timeline. Do you remember how this works?
The George Floyd murder hadn't really reached national prominence, nor had Breonna Taylor, even though it's been almost 100 days since that happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, all the national spotlight was on Ahmaud Arbery when we recorded last.
In much like school shootings, it's very sad that we have to go, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And for those that are not watching the news, and I feel like more people are, we've had, 6 lynchings that have been quote unquote ruled suicides. Right. Just so happens they all have to be black men, right? So it's just, while we talked about you're cautiously optimistic about change, there's still crap going on. But because the podcast released, because stuff was going on around the world with demonstrations and rallies and protests, I was getting some emails, some texts, some questions. So let's jump right in. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So one of my favorite parts of last episode was I read through some of your Facebook stuff, and we're going to do that again. But first, I'm going to read a press release entitled "What It Means to Be a Blue Devil." We believe that the Blue Devils are defined by the people who participate in our organization with their love and significant bonds that they have for each other. Participating in the Blue Devils, we grow from being an individual to having ownership in the collective group and achieving at the highest level by taking risks. We learn and experience. We mature with trust and faith. We make choices that are guided by high values and positive attitudes. Our standards are set high. We learn to be good, empathetic people who are responsible leaders. We find our passion creatively while striving for excellence. And we experience joy, love, passion, defeats, and success. Because of each person's experience in the Blue Devils, we believe our young people will not sit on the sidelines today. They will turn their passion into compassion and take their love for their fellow member and expand it into love for all, no matter their color, race, sex, sexual orientation, or beliefs. We expect that they will not underachieve, but take risks and put themselves on the line for what they believe with honesty and purpose. The Blue Devils make a difference by teaching and influencing the young people who will guide us into the future with love and a compassion for all. We know that they will take us out of an American divided that is highlighted by the injustice of people. They will stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves, not sit idly by, but take risks with their amazing potential and apply their talents to the significant issues we are witnessing today. We are positive the young people who have participated with the Blue Devils and all groups in this activity will make a lasting difference by their constant convictions. Their journey has evolved from joining us as an individual, taking the focus from, quote, me, turning it into, quote, us, and expanding to all with a purpose. It is their journey and they are ready for it, and we absolutely believe they will make decisions that will have a lasting positive impact on the world. They will speak out and stand up for those who are not heard or seen. None of us is stronger than all of us. And then they put a quote, Martin Niemöller, perhaps? I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. There we go. That was posted on June 1st. Later that day, you posted, TFW, that feeling when Bratz Dolls has something more meaningful to say than the organization for which I work. This is essentially the, quote, I need to fulfill a word count version of All Lives Matter. I'm disgusted. I'm upset, y'all. I'm upset that the arts, generally speaking, often feel that the act of making art is doing something/enough. I'm upset that this statement puts all of the responsibility on the members to go make change and none of it on the organization. I'm upset at the idea that teaching a student how to be a good citizen is conflated with teaching a student to be actively anti-racist. In a society built on injustice and inequality, teaching students to be responsible people isn't the same as explicitly teaching them to speak up and take action. Good U.S. citizens maintain the status quo/order. They don't disrupt or fight. I'm upset that this statement has so many words and none of them are Black Lives Matter. I recently went on Sketchbook Podcast to talk about my experiences as a black person in DCI. I mentioned how alienating it is, the extra labor that comes with it, the micro and macro aggressions, etc. This is just the latest piece of evidence corroborating my story. I don't want to know what it means to be a Blue Devil today. I want to know that my employer and its parent organization believes that Black Blue Devil lives matter. I want to know that it believes Black lives matter. I want to know that it believes my life matters. You hate to see it. Then on June 6th, you posted this. And I promise we're going to get you to talk. I just wanted to read all of this, and then you're going to address this. On 6/6, you posted, a change is coming. I realize that may seem like an empty, cliche thing to say, but trust me when I tell you, a change is coming. You might have seen my reaction to the statement posted by the Blue Devils on June 1st. I was bewildered and hurt by it. I immediately emailed the CEO after reading it and spoke to a number of staff members and marching members about it. We were all on the same page in finding the statement deeply upsetting. Much to my surprise, I got a phone call from Sean. He wanted to apologize and to know what could be done to make things right. We had a lot of talks this week, and I know the organization was also in touch with other people within the Blue Devils family who had felt burned by the messaging put out. I'm happy to say that the organization heard our voices and began to work with me and others on a specific action plan that goes beyond apologies, platitudes, or even statements of solidarity. More details will be released soon on what the organization is doing to change internally and to be an agent of change within the activity and within the performing arts. A change is coming. I don't know how much you can talk about these changes or these plans. Maybe can you just talk about sort of how all the corps started releasing their announcements. Some were more platitudes, virtue signaling. A number of my friends started ranking all the drum corps announcements. And, obviously Blue Devils they weren't last. They were pretty close to last with the initial announcement. I'm curious if you can kind of walk us through what went on, maybe what you can share about it, and maybe your opinions on your particular organization and how they reacted and how they are correcting all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So when all the corps started releasing statements, I didn't really feel like any of the statements were very impactful. I mean, it was a lot of, it's like the corporate branding kind of thing where it's like, we here, I'm thinking about my utility company right now. We here at National Grid want you to know that we care deeply. So here's your bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
it was just words. And I mean, hearing that initial Blue Devil statement again, it's like I struggle to know what it's about. Um, so, before I made my post on Facebook in reaction to it, I had already emailed the CEO. I had talked to a number of people, both black and not, within the organization, staff members, all of that. I had expressed a lot of anger and frustration over it, like before I made that post. Um, so then I did, and realized I was taking a pretty big risk, because that is my employer.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I just so it was like in such a public facing forum. It was on Instagram and it was on Facebook, and I saw so many people kind of hold on. I saw so many like white people kind of like applauding it and being like, oh, like this is so great, and like all the meanwhile I'm sitting here like this completely like erases the issues and like my existence in the meantime without actually. So I felt like I needed to to like speak my piece, I guess you could say. And more and more of the statements continued rolling out, some better than others. I didn't feel like any of them were like really that great. Some of them, like the blue coat statement, was good in that it was very specifically naming like the fallen brothers and sisters. It was like very specifically naming those problems, like their murders. So it was good in that respect. But at the same time, at that time, there wasn't really much about like, here's what we're going to do to address it. So after my post had only been up maybe an hour or so, and that's when I got my first phone call from Sean, who's the CEO, who's someone I've known for a long time, actually. I marched with him. So we had a pretty long talk about how I felt about that post. I think he had already talked to some other people too. I was getting messages from, some of the black members of the Horn Line from last year. And it was a hard conversation, probably harder for him than it was for me. But I was very deliberate in my feeling of what the statement needed to say, like what they needed to do to make things right. We talked again later that day, maybe like 4 or 5 hours later after he had kind of talked to some of the board and all of that. And I was again like pretty specific and like, well, here's what I think it needs to say. Then we were kind of in touch over the next couple of days. Then he asked me to be on a Zoom call with him and some of the board, and we were talking about like the new statement to be drafted. But beyond the new statement, we were talking about like what kind of an action plan could be created. And I gave a lot of input. There were good things already there as well. I could tell, like much to their credit, they did a lot of homework after that kind of initial blow up. They did a lot of homework, and so things were already looking better. By the time I was on the call with them, I don't want to speak specifically about some of those things until they release them.
Correct.
But I can say that after that Zoom call, I was far more optimistic because like the goals and actions that we talked about setting in place are very achievable things.
Hmm.
Some that can be done starting right now. It wasn't any like super pie in the sky thing. It was all very some actions big, but it's all things that like they can implement to start making changes now. Um, so I was also kind of happy to see a few other drum corps seem to be taking those steps. And within the drum corps community, there's a lot more mobilization, particularly of Black people who have participated in the activity. There have been a number of groups being started on Instagram or Facebook, a number of initiatives like caucuses forming. So there's been some pretty positive changes, I think, being made, and there are good things on the horizon. Of course, it remains to be seen. You know,
Right. Because we're not in the middle of a summer. We don't even know if there will be a summer next year. You know, we don't know any of
right?
these things, and so we can say we're going to do all these things, but until they're put into action. And honestly, this reset, this pause, the Corona pause, this gives the drum corps, they don't have an excuse. They can't say, well, I'm on tour, we can't figure this out. Like, they have nothing but time. They can figure out how to make this work for when their first camp will be in January, I'm going to assume. If then, they've got 6 months to figure something out. And if they can't figure it out in 6 months, then maybe they're just hoping it blows over. But I will say on June 6th, the Blue Devils released a video on Instagram and on Facebook, and I won't go through the video, but what they did post was, today and every day we stand with the Black community. Stand with us and join us as we work and address these gaps in our organization and our community. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Hashtag BD World. So they did release something, and that video is out there. You can go look at it, and it does end, I believe, with Black Lives Matter, I think is the last thing that you see on there. So speaking about these drum corps that have released these things, and we're just going to focus on drum corps. We're not going to focus on like the brands like Pearl and all these other places or stuff. I have a few questions, and I'm gonna start with, the former executive director of the Crossmen was released from his board position, etc. I think he scrapped his Facebook. He shared I'll just call it a blatant conspiracy, fake news, whatever, just a very just in poor taste video having to do with the Black Lives Movement. And that's all we need to address. The Crossman organization quickly addressed it, removed him, whatever. And so I guess I want to ask, is there a responsibility for every drum corps to release something like that kind of thing? And is anybody who speaks for a drum corps, quote unquote, whether as a board member, a staff member, should they be releasing these things? Should they talk about these things? Or it's just better if a lot of them stay quiet, because not every drum corps released something. I think pretty much every world-class corps did. I think maybe 2 or 3 open class corps did, especially the one that you are involved with. So is there a responsibility by drum corps, let's just focus on that, and people who are in the higher ranks of drum corps to address this, to deal with it, and to say Black Lives Matter? Like, are these all things that they're supposed to be doing?
I think so. Yes. I think that we've clearly seen what happens, when you don't address anything.
Yeah.
Like when you kind of sit back and just assume that either one thing that I've actually heard a lot, and this is on a corporate level or even from just like white friends of mine who I know are very well intentioned, not racist people, putting that in quotes. I know people can't see me. I've gotten so many messages from people saying that they feel like it's not their place to say anything, or that they don't even know where to start or what they could say, which is I get it. Like I get why they would feel that way. At the same time, I think that everybody can at least outwardly profess that they believe Black Lives Matter, right? I don't think that that's too big of an ask, even for somebody or some organization that claims they don't know where to begin. Like, I'm not expecting, every like Tom, Dick, and Harry walking down the street to be able to pass legislation, but I am expecting them all to acknowledge this problem,
Right.
um, and to be vocal in their support of this movement. I do have that expectation. Like, we can't just assume it anymore. It's clear. It's clear that we can't assume it.
Do you find that I am obviously not black. For those of you who don't know what I look like, I'm Mexican. So I'm asking questions from an entirely different point of view. When you read all, I'm sure you read all of the drum corps announcements, right? Or anything that came across your timeline and feed and stuff like that, right?
I read the ones that came across my feed, and then they all kind of started looking the same, so I stopped.
And that's what I was going to, some are quote unquote better than others. Some people just put a picture of their logo or something and say like, we care, or something ridiculous like that. My question is, and you talked about your non-black friends who said things like, I don't know where to begin. The Blue Devils are a great example. They released something, they got called out for it, and they said, hey, our bad, let's work with this. That's okay, right? Like, these organizations, these people that don't say Black Lives Matter or don't do it, like, oh God, Drew Brees, right? I mean, let's be real honest. Drew Brees is worried about getting manhandled because his O-line isn't going to block for him. And whether he believes it or not, he did come out and all of a sudden attack Trump, which is, great. But he, quote unquote, learned. I'm doing it in quotes also. I think that was a financial learning and a PR learning. But it is okay for someone to say, hey, we messed up. I didn't realize, I'm in my own world and I didn't know this existed, for no why somebody could say that. But it's okay for the drum corps and for people in general to come out and go like, look, like, I'm really sorry. Like today, like I put this on Facebook, and I'm not the only one in the world. I am embarrassed that when I watched the TV series Watchmen for the first time, I Googled the Tulsa Massacre.
Oh, wow.
Because I did not remember learning about that. And my wife turned to me, she goes, did that really happen? She's from Kentucky and I'm from Texas. We're right next to Oklahoma. And I Googled it and I said, this was a real thing. And I learned about it and I was like, holy crap. Now that's my own fault. That's my learning in history. We're probably focusing too much on Texas history as opposed to regular history. But there's a lot of us out there that don't know these things and are trying our best, and we mess up and we release statements or something. They would come back and go like, hey, it's our bad. Like, I don't want to ask you to say that's okay, but I mean, we're doing our best to learn, and that's okay that we're trying to get educated and learn, right?
I think that people need to be open to learning for their entire lives. Some of that learning is going to be in more public forums when you release things publicly and get called out for them publicly. Some of that learning might happen privately. But a lot of these stories and lessons, I'm glad that they're coming more to prominence through things like Watchmen and all of that. At the same time, I learned about that when I was like a child, partially because of my dad's love of history and my mom's love of history, and being black and growing up in a black household. But at the same time, I feel like I've been exposed to people talking about that my whole life. Maybe just because of where I'm oriented or the things that I read or the voices that I listen to. But it's not as if the information was hidden until 2018, 2019. It's just that people aren't used to orienting themselves to gather knowledge from multiple places. They don't realize that their sources are whitewashed. Like, it's the whole ideology thing, right? And I'm going to very badly use an example from this philosopher, this modern guy, Slavoj Žižek. He talks about the movie from the late 80s called They Live. That's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, basically, where the premise is that all these people are living in this world where they don't understand that there are aliens among them, and you can only see the true message of things if you put on these special glasses. So it's like people are being subliminally just impacted by things all the time. And kind of the point is that when you're in a particular ideology, you don't know that you are. So it's like you don't know that you're supposed to be looking somewhere else for your information. Like when you come up through public school and you take history courses, it's not going to occur to you, hey, there might be history I'm not being taught, because why would that be a thought that you have?
Mm-hmm.
It's not until you happen to meet people who have been exposed to other things, or like maybe if you go into like secondary education or something, like it's not until you leave like the kind of the institutionalized things that you start
Mm-hmm.
learning this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really fault people for not knowing it, but at the same time, it's like this is this has been it's been public knowledge the whole time.
Right.
So
Yeah, and
it's
yeah. Sorry.
so yeah, I think that it's good for people to keep learning. You have to be people have to be open to learning and like maybe getting their pride a little hurt. It happens to me all the time. You just have to get used to the feeling.
Sure, and I know that there's a lot of us out there who, to use the word du jour, feel that we're pretty woke, right? Like, yeah, but then I think there's that moment of embarrassment. You're like, God, I thought I knew so much, or I thought I was the best ally I could be, and then you're like, what, Tulsa they didn't just make this up for the move for HBO, like the Tulsa because it just sounds so awful for me to be talking to a black person and be like, it just seems like, how could that happen? Right? Like that is such a white privilege thing to say. And I'm not even white, but I come from a place of privilege, and I'm just like, no way. Like that doesn't sound legit. That's straight out of a movie. And it was out of a movie, but it was real life.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right. I think there's that element where I don't want to say you can't be woke enough, but yeah, you don't reach the optimal level of allyship and whatever. Like,
Yeah,
it's never ending.
It's a movable wall, right?
Yeah.
Like the better you get, the further away that wall gets, and like
Mm-hmm.
your life is a journey to get as close to it as you can, with the understanding that you're not going to touch it. You
Right.
just need to keep trying to.
Sure. Yeah, I just ordered a book that doesn't release till September, but I want to read it now. And the guy, he wrote a book basically talking about the Civil War and how we are completely wrong, because it's like you said, whitewashed to the point where and it speaks to the Confederacy and how it's just a whole deep thing that I've found so incredibly fascinating. But you're not going to learn that how are you going to be taught as a sixth grader white supremacy and like focus. I mean, you should be, but anyway. So, boy, we could go on a discussion about not drum corps for a long time. Okay, so let's bring it back to drum corps. And this was something. These are all anonymous submissions. I mean, I know who they are, but we're not going to mention names or anything like that. So, someone really asked us, and by us, basically you, to dive deeper into what the activity drum corps needs to bring about equitable opportunity for Black, Indigenous peoples of color, right? And let me preface this by saying I understand what this sounds like, me, non-Black, asking a Black person to solve drum corps. I realize this, right? But I think people are they're very curious about like, hey, we think this is a good idea. Is it a good idea? And I don't know how to frame it in a way that doesn't sound like we need you to help us help you. But I think there's that element of it. And so, the two A words, affirmative action, right? Does there need to be affirmative action in drum corps? Do we need to quote unquote lower the standards for admission into drum corps and maybe even require quotas? Because some would feel that that's a noble cause, but it's also, antithetical to the current model and goals of drum corps. So it's a lot of stuff to throw at, but what are your thoughts about that particular question statement? Thought.
I'll first address the piece that sticks out to me the most in all of that. The idea that the standards of admission would need to be lowered in order for there to be more Black, Indigenous, POC people in the activity. It's not as if Black, Indigenous, and POC people aren't talented enough to make drum corps.
Right.
That has never, ever, ever, ever been the case. Think about any activity that exists when Black, Indigenous, when POC, when people get the opportunity, when they have access to it,
Mm-hmm.
they will excel at it.
Correct.
So to me, this is completely about access. And a lot of that, whether or not people want to hear me go into a whole like Marxist thing right now, has to do with how much it costs to do drum corps. It has to do with the fact that drum corps, which was apparently started to get, troubled teens off the streets, is now a country club activity. It has to do with the fact that like even open class groups cost $5,000. Like, so this is not to say that all like black people of color, indigenous people are poor. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that the pipeline to drum corps typically goes through wealthier school districts that through lots of fun political maneuvers, whether that's housing covenants, redlining, what have you, they just happen to be in primarily white places, right? That's
coincidentally, yes.
Right. By some coincidence, the funding from the state for particular school districts tend to be centered in places that are primarily white. So it's not that there aren't people of color, in those places. There are some, but it's just that they have typically been kind of manufactured so that there aren't, right? It's the whole like de facto de jure segregation thing, right? Where it's not by law, it's not segregation by law, but it just so happens that a particular income level, race, ethnicity of people keep finding themselves in these suburban enclaves with these wealthy school districts, right? So that has become like the access, the pipeline to get into drum corps. And for students who want to be band directors or anything like that, it's kind of a requirement that you're in the activity now, right? So it becomes this cyclical thing of like, well, my band director like did this drum corps, and yeah, so it's like this really, dare I say, like incestuous sort of thing. That's happened. So if we really want to get at the root of how to like solve some of these problems for drum corps, it's going to have to be way cheaper. It's going to have to actually be accessible to students who don't go to those schools, which would mean that the organizations themselves would have to have some kind of a model that doesn't rely so heavily on student tuition for operational costs. It would take a lot more fundraising or corporate sponsorship or any of that. And since we're operating on multi-million-dollar budgets, it's a difficult task. But all of the things that you kind of read on that statement, whether it was like scholarships, I think was a thing that's on the statement, or like affirmative action, these sorts of things, like they're putting small band-aids on the giant open wound that is how inaccessible of an activity drum corps has become. As much as we would like to pretend that it, again, is like this big, the youth coming together to make art and make the world a better place, it's not really for everyone. And like looking at like income. So that's one place to start. In terms of like affirmative action, it's so interesting to me when this comes up in conversation, because there are the negative connotations about who it benefits, when statistically speaking it benefits white women more than any other group. Yeah, and that's been true since the 70s.
Wow.
So it has benefited white women more than anyone else. Additionally, like the idea of quotas and that sort of thing, I fear, and this is just based on my experience marching, the things that I heard when I marched, the things people thought about me, I can't imagine it actually being on the books that you're like required to have black, because people were already telling me that I got in because of affirmative action, even though I was playing circles around them. Like, people were already saying that to me when that was not the case. So I would hesitate to do anything like that. And the same kind of goes with like minority scholarships. Oh, well, we've got our minority scholarship trumpet player here. Like, that puts such a burden on those students and it makes it seem as if they did not earn their place, right? At least that's kind of how I see it going. I do think that things like scholarships and all that can be a way to address some of the like inaccessibility of drum corps, but I don't think it's a sustainable fix at all. Um, so I think all these things are cute ideas, but unless drum corps is cheaper, like nothing about the diversity in drum corps is going to get fixed. Nothing about access is going to get fixed because it's still just going to be, a few here and there that got some kind of assistance. Now, whether that means like changing where auditions are held so that people aren't having to fly across the universe to audition, whether that means like waiving audition fees, that I don't know, like recruiting in different places. Like there are just so many talented, and I saw there was something about HBCU and like the email you sent me, most talented trumpet players in the world, straight up.
Yeah.
But how many of them are going to get access to these auditions, whether it's cost or location? And then if they get there, how many of them are going to be denied because of like the marching style or something? So it's like, if you really want access to that talent and you really want to be equitable and accessible, to me, it would make a lot more sense to be, doing clinics in some of these places, fostering relationships with some of these schools. And again, making the activity cheaper. I'm going to keep harping on that because like none of this is worth anything if it still costs $5,000 to do drum corps. It's yeah.
I agree. I use the words that I were sent here, and I want to circle back to quote unquote lowering the standards for admission. And I would like to think that the person who mentioned it maybe had to do more with what you said with HBCU, where their style of playing and marching is so different that when they walk into audition, your Jim Ott winning brass people are like, yeah, we're not going to do it. Like I have heard people that say, I don't want to have to teach them, not the HBCU people, but like when someone comes for their corps and they play the audition, they're like, yeah, we can find someone that we don't have to teach that can already do that. And these are people from top 6 brass lines who want to win the Ott or have won the Ott because they know, well, I can skip over this guy because this person next to him or her, I don't have to all I have to do is work on tone and stuff like that. And so I think that's maybe where we're coming from, lowering admissions where, okay, hey, this kid has got a triple G. I don't know if that's possible. They come from Atlanta A&T. Forgive me if that's not a real school. They need to teach them, and so maybe that's what they're talking about lowering admissions. Is that along the lines of what maybe you're referring to?
I don't think that's lowering the standards. I think that's expanding the standards.
Okay,
right?
Expand. Yeah, and I think that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, because there's let's say currently X group that has the Jim Ott winning brass line thinks that there is one way to produce sound, and they are not willing to hear or work on any others. And it's like, if you don't already do this, don't come here, right? So I think it's more about expanding the standards, and also teaching. Like if you want them to sound a certain way, teach them to sound that way.
They would do that if they're in middle school or the high schools that they teach at, but they don't want to do that in the summer. They need to win their brass award. And so you mentioned changing auditions and all that other kind of stuff, and we've talked about HBCU groups, and so I'm curious. I have heard, and I don't know if you know this, I have heard that most auditions for HBCU colleges take place during DCI finals week, and that a lot of those institutions have a policy that if you don't show up for auditions, you won't make the group. And I don't know how much truth there is or not. Have you heard anything about sort of a conflict of scheduling when it comes to DCI versus HBCU auditions?
For some schools, but I'm not sure if that's true for all of them. And I also feel like more work could be done to kind of foster a relationship between drum corps and those schools.
Right.
To where if that was like a real issue, they could say, hey, like, here's what doing DCI is going to do for like this student, and the HBCU can be like, well, here the student, like it could be a good relationship, and I'm sure that they could negotiate having someone show up like
Mm-hmm.
2 days late, to the
Yeah,
week, if they
right.
had those good relationships between the corps and the schools. But
And that also goes with, you mentioned this last time. I mean, how many staff members of any drum corps also are affiliated with HBCU groups, whether they are the directors or I don't, techs or whatever.
yeah, not many. Off the top of my head, I can think of three people I know who they're not currently affiliated with HBCUs, but they very recently were. They went to HBCUs and very
Hmm.
recently were, and they teach. So I can think of a few, but it's not common.
Right. And what's interesting, this is not just a drum corps problem, but we're talking about drum corps. The amount of shows that we do in the South, the quote unquote South, versus the amount of drum corps that are from the South and or that we have auditions in the South, right? Like we have the Spirit of Atlanta. That's the only world-class corps, no, Music City now, from Nashville, Tennessee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a few open class corps, I guess Southwind, but I don't know if that's considered the South, depending on where the Mason-Dixie line is. Louisiana Stars.
Mm-hmm.
Is Florida the South?
Yes.
So Heat Wave from this. So we have primarily more an open class representation. And if I have not mentioned your open class group in the South, I apologize. But how many corps come and audition in Atlanta? How many corps decide to go audition in any other state other than the big like four? Right. I mean, Spirit's gonna be all over the place because they're from there.
Yeah.
But and I work with a corps that doesn't audition. They audition in Dallas. They audition in Indianapolis.
I want to
And so
say Cavaliers were doing an Atlanta audition at one point. I don't know if
that would make sense because of Mike Martin. Yeah.
I don't know if they still do. But it's hard for me to think of other groups that maybe Vanguard did when Chip was there.
That would make sense also. Yeah.
But yeah, it's not like a common place for people to do auditions.
Right. And yet one of the biggest shows of the year is in Atlanta. The first show of any year for the last few years is in Detroit. And how many groups have auditions in Detroit other than maybe the Legends, who are from Kalamazoo, right? Kalamazoo,
Yeah,
Michigan.
Yeah, they're from Kalamazoo, and no drum corps have auditions in Detroit.
Do any drum corps have auditions in Cincinnati? And there are a few in Ohio, like few drum corps in Ohio, or do they just expect them to drive up to wherever they audition to?
They probably expect them to drive up.
So, if I'm not going to say in the perfect world, but you're saying, in terms of access, let's just talk about not having to buy a plane ticket. You would do good by putting auditions in different areas of the country that are maybe a higher percentage of minorities than your normal, like, let's go to, like they'll say, we go to Houston. Yeah, you're going to Houston because it's in Texas. Texas doesn't count because you want all of our kids and all of our money. Right. But, I mean, you in order to increase the physical access, moving camps and auditions, some of them to different areas where there are more minority representation, is a step in the right direction, correct?
It is, as long as the corps have done the work to actively recruit, because I know corps can very easily write it off as like, oh, well, it's a waste of our money to have staff members and like rent out this school for a day to do auditions in Detroit and only have 15 people show up. But I'm like, but how much work have you been doing in the Detroit area to make yourself known, even though there is a show there every year now? How much local access is there to that show?
Yeah. So this goes with that, like, hey, you have a whole 6 months before you're going to audition. Start talking to your band directors. Start talking to people in the community. Don't just send them a flyer, right? Hey, will you put our drum corps flyer in your band hall?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put it next to all the universities that do the same. So somebody had mentioned, we're talking about making drum corps cheaper, and this isn't the answer to it, but somebody responded, if we make DCI cheaper and more accessible, does that mean we have to remove the competitive aspect? Because I think there's this idea that in order to win, you have to every kid needs to spend $5,000 so that we can put a $60,000, could be $60,000 bridge or a staircase on our field to win. And neither of those shows won. Not that they weren't good or anything, but I mean, you said it, and maybe this is the answer. You can't rely entirely on member dues. So you have to find outside help for that. But if you want to make drum corps cheaper, does that mean you remove the competitive aspect of it?
I don't think so. I mean, I know that things have gotten pretty out of control with prop budgets and just how much the activity has turned into theater. And I'm not gonna like go into that whole back in my day drum corps thing right now because like I happen to love the way the activity looks now.
Agreed.
Um,
Agreed.
it's way more fun to watch than when I was marching. Um,
Hmm.
so I get all of that. I do think that the way that budgets have really ballooned with the show production has done more than just cripple like the accessibility, right? It also does make it harder for groups with smaller budgets to compete. I completely recognize that. I don't think that the competitive aspect needs to be removed. I just think that we talked about this a little bit last time. Judging criteria needs to be reevaluated and recalibrated.
Hmm.
Like what kinds of things are being rewarded, right? What kinds of things are recognized? Because there was a lot of good drum corps before props started showing up, like in the way that they are on the field. Because I mean, obviously props have been around since like the '80s, but
Sure.
there have been a lot of good shows, before this modern era of drum corps.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's impossible to have good shows again, and like without the overblown budget. At the same time, I don't want to like say that some drum corps can't do their vision of having, jetpacks on the field or whatever. It's just that there's got to be a way to evaluate everything
Right.
fairly.
Sure. And speaking from that designer side, I mean, what designers are getting paid now versus what they were getting paid when you marched, entirely like it's stratus. I mean, some people are getting paid a teacher's salary to write drill
Yep.
for a drum corps. And hey, I'll take that money too. If someone offered me that, I'm not going to say no. But it started an arms race, and now it's like, oh, you want to hire me? Well, so and so will hire me for this amount of money, and I got a new car to buy. So that's also a problem. And I don't know the numbers, and I'm sure I'll get texts from people going like, well, actually, we only spend this much money on our design budget, but I mean, $100,000 on a design budget is $100,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how many kids have to pay $4,000 to pay for that. Okay, so speaking about money, speaking about not imaginary lines, but legal segregation, so to speak, right? I live in Austin, and there is a literal concrete line that divides the city. I mean, it was put there for a reason, to put all the brown people, the Mexicans, and the blacks on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they're all getting pushed out because gentrification, and that's a whole nother story. And rising property taxes. So this question or this subject was about like, okay, if somebody was starting a drum corps and they had tons of money, let's say they were, what's Bill Cook, is that his name, or Bill Mason, the guy from Star of Indiana, right?
Oh, sure.
Like if somebody was going to start a drum corps, how would they go about fielding their membership? Because I have had that quote unquote dream, right? Of like, all right, if I ever won the lottery and I started a drum corps, I would probably just say, if you're a Texas All-Stater, you march for free, right? And me thinking it's so altruistic. I'm giving a kid a free scholarship. Of course, I'm getting the best players in the country. They come from all over the state. But even then, you have that issue of access because while there would be more Hispanic representation, I imagine, because of places like the Valley and El Paso, you would still have a high percentage of white and Middle Eastern Indian, et cetera. But still, that doesn't solve the problem, right? Because I'm still going for something like, I want the best of the best. And you're like, well, yes, but you have to pay to be the best and la 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 la. So I guess this thought experiment is like, there are drum corps that start off to be for female only, or drum corps that start off to be men only, or maybe there's drum corps that are African American only or black only. So like, how does something like that help, or how would something like that go about doing to help in what we're talking about diversity in drum corps?
So the first thing that kind of came to my mind was thinking about the Yale School of Music, who got like that massive endowment, maybe maybe a little more than a decade ago. It was so massive an endowment that students don't pay tuition if they're accepted into the School of
Right.
Music at Yale, right?
Yeah.
So, like you were saying, it seems that would allow for you to get the best of the best. However, um, that comes down to, still the wealthy students who are able to afford the lessons from the age of
Mm-hmm.
5 or whatever, and who went to this conservatory or that conservatory and all of that. So it kind of, to me, has to start on like a middle school level of like what kind of, not just training, but like access to training students are getting. Like, where did their directors go to school? What are their directors teaching them? Like, are you going to get a band director who marched some top 6 drum corps who's super well qualified? Are you going to get them to teach at some school that's like primarily black and brown?
Mm-hmm.
Often the answer is no, not because they don't want to be there, but because that school is not going to pay them as much money
Sure.
as the school on the other side of the concrete line. So it keeps coming back to money for me. Like, the money would have to be pumped in to those schools to like show that the state is just as interested in their education and their access to various opportunities. And I'm trying to be careful to not make it seem as if there's some type of like music education that's better inherently than another. But it is clear that the things that are expected of you when you audition for drum corps are not things that everyone has been taught, right? They're not things that every student has access to. And that typically comes down to what places have money and what don't. So if this was like I have all the money in the world and I'm going to start a drum corps, I would have a very long plan, I guess, that would start with education at a young age, and like teachers getting paid higher salaries at these schools,
Right.
that typically have like underserved populations, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would have to start there. Otherwise, to me, it's again just putting little band-aids on like a giant gaping wound. It's because, yeah, you're still, even if your drum corps is totally free, if you're not allowing opportunities of access to a wider population, you're still just going to get the rich kids who know about drum corps, who have been taking lessons their whole lives. That's just, yeah.
So in essence, it becomes more outreach in the community in which they're trying to recruit from, right? So let's just say, Texas Drum and Bugle Corps out of Texas City, Texas, right? Like, they could be a free drum corps, but like you said, your free means the best of the best are going to come and go, I can march for free, and then that pushes out those that couldn't afford. And yes, let's be clear, there are poor white, Mexican, black. Like, there's a lot of there's poor people everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But so we're talking about access for that. So when it comes to minority representation, though, not just being free is enough. It's got like, okay, we're going to now pay our staff members to go and train and help out at the middle schools and the high schools of our community, right? Like, that's the kind of thing that they can do, because that's a long-term investment. Like, we're talking like, okay, we're not going to see the fruits of our labor for 7 years, but in 7 years, we should see these numbers go up because these kids got to study with our Jim Ott winning brass percussion, or Fred Sanford winning percussion. Like, it has to be more than just tuition's free, right? Basically what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a problem that has been building, since, let's say, 1619. Like, you're not going to fix it in like a day. You're not going to fix it in a season, even.
Mm-hmm.
It takes like real committed effort and long-term vision to make things like this happen.
And the part of the problem now with the state of drum corps is drum corps is basically global, right? National. It's no longer regional. It's kind of like the high school bands that have multiple middle schools that feed them, and they're not direct feeders. So they're like, well, I could teach them, but then they would go to other schools. So I'm only going to focus on the kids I know I'm going to get. And you can't do that with drum corps. I mean, how many kids from the Blue Devils literally grew up in Concord, and like, I don't know the percentage. It could be really high. I don't know. But, look at drum corps now. Every drum corps has Texas kids in them. And, there's only 2 world class. It's just Genesis and Crossman from Texas.
Right.
And they're everywhere. So it's kind of like saying like, okay, we may not get all these kids, but we're going to focus on the general Madison, Wisconsin area, or the general San Antonio area, that kind of thing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
kind of.
like, put some more faith in your staff's abilities. You know, like
Yeah, I mean,
if you have the best staff in the business,
hmm
then let them teach.
well, you're paying them like band directors. Might as well let them be band directors. Out of there's 9 other months of the year that they're not working. I'm going to get tons of messages on that one. Okay, so you've mentioned this, and we mentioned it in the first episode, and we've kind of touched on it. But someone did ask what types of barriers exist that hinder participation as a member. And you talked about money, and you can feel free to start with money again. But I'm curious if there's other things that maybe you've encountered or you've heard or yourself experienced that would hinder participation as a member of Drum Corps.
Um, I mean, I'll always come back to talking about money, so I won't even start with it. We'll get there. It'll happen at some point.
Of course, sure, yeah.
So some of the things I've heard about, if I think about HBCUs again, is the barrier when it comes to style again.
Mm-hmm.
Like thinking like about one of my personal friends who went to an HBCU and ended up marching a very good drum corps, in the late 90s, early 2000s, and all of that. I know that he had the barrier of kind of style when it came to marching in this drum corps style versus marching in this HBCU band. So that was a thing that he and other people have had to deal with. There's cultural barriers, when you are surrounded by a majority of like middle to upper class white people. If you are not from that particular cultural background, there's kind of the alienation that comes with it. And it's, having to make the decision on a daily basis whether you want to try to blend in or whether you just want to deal with standing out and kind of feeling alone,
Mm-hmm.
And it can change. I mean, I said daily, it can change by the hour. It's just extra work that you do when you're at drum corps.
Right.
Like, am I going to conserve some of my energy for this ensemble block, or I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
say something about this? It might seem like a small thing, but honestly, the food was such a big thing for me.
Uh-huh.
It continues to be a thing for me. It was difficult for me, kind of, and I will say this with all the love in my heart, like when I marched Vanguard, the Miss Amana crew, they can cook their butts off. Great food.
Sure.
Like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying the food there is bad. That's probably the best drum corps food, looking back on it.
Mm-hmm.
But still, very different than like my
Mm-hmm.
usual diet.
Uh-huh.
So, it's a whole summer of eating things that, are good, but that like I don't necessarily want to eat, or that I don't necessarily want to. And now that, as an adult, like I cook all the time, right? So it's
Sure.
a big struggle for me now when I'm on the road for weeks.
Right.
Not being in my kitchen, not making my own food, I try to have like a mostly pescatarian diet. That doesn't happen.
No. Yeah.
It's impossible. Or even the couple of years when I was vegetarian, like that's difficult. It's more difficult at some drum corps than it is at others, right? So,
Right.
but just like having that little bit of like cultural home and not being able to access it, was difficult for me. Just kind of the camaraderie that you have with people who look like you, like with your friends and everything. I've had better luck as a staff member, particularly like when I taught at Spirit of Atlanta in 2014. That was the blackest drum corps staff I'd ever been a part of, and it just felt so different and so good teaching there,
Yeah.
in comparison to other places I've taught. So it's just kind of the ability to really relax,
Mm-hmm.
is another thing. And that was hard for me as a member. I had, one other person in the horn line, who he was in charge of cutting my hair, because I was not letting anybody else do it. And he's still one of my best friends. He actually,
Uh-huh.
I just missed a call from him actually.
Oh, apologies.
But but yeah, so there's little things like that that all kind of start to add up over the course of a summer, you know. And you drum corps is weird in that, I mean, I guess it's like the military too, where it requires a certain amount of conformity, right? So there are
Sure.
times when you can kind of lose yourself in the persona that you have to
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
embody, but then there's also moments where you remember like who you are and like
Sure.
how out of place you feel.
Of
So
course. I want to talk about food because you mentioned the words microaggression and macroaggression, and I think food could fall under sort of the microaggression aspect of it, where maybe it's not necessarily on purpose, but they're clearly not thinking about it. And you know, I've never marched drum corps. I've been lucky enough to just design and hang out in the food, and I know that sometimes it's like Taco Tuesday, right? Because who doesn't love tacos, right? I
who
get
doesn't
it.
love alliteration?
Yeah, exactly. Both of those things, right? And they're like, I don't know that I can't. I'm sure somebody at some point has said this, and maybe they still think this, that they're like, this is our ethnic food for the week or something like that. And so it seems like there are attempts to help out, or to like, okay, we have quote unquote white food, and I hate to say just white food, but meatloaf, that's white food, isn't it? I don't know. But you know, tacos and rice and stuff like that, Spanish rice, you know, that's quote unquote Mexican food, that's a Hispanic food, and blah blah blah. And so I guess when we talk about we talked about staff members and representation, not only in gender but in culture, race, heritage. You know, having a black staff member. Is it somewhat important then that you know your food people, your cooks, your cook crew, they have that sort of representation if they can get it? And I understand it's a whole different thing because of volunteers, but shouldn't that be something that we actively search out and not necessarily say we need a black cook, but say like we have black students? And honestly, and again, I will admit my embarrassment, it never crossed my mind, Alex, to hear that the food part was an issue. And that, again, that's the privilege part of me, right? That's the me growing up in Austin and living a sort of whiteified life. And I'm like, I can eat white food and I can eat Mexican food and it's no big deal. And not thinking that, what do my Middle Eastern friends think about my Native American, my Indian, my black? Like that's culture and heritage. That's not race. And so is that something that staffs, that drum corps need to be aware of also? Like, don't just fill out your brass staff with an ethnically diverse staff. Look at also your support staff as well.
I so I think the short answer is yes, I think so. I'm just kind of imagining a world in which like a drum corps board is sitting around trying to make their support staff like look like a Benetton ad, you know, where they're just like everyone holding hands in the cook truck. Like,
Just give them a Pepsi. That's all they want. Yeah.
so I think it's important to try to recognize like the various cultures that exist within your drum corps. I understand the logistic difficulty of that. At the same time, and I'm only speaking of like, you know, I grew up eating soul food. I'm thinking of that culinary heritage that
Mm-hmm.
comes directly from not having a lot of money or access to expensive things, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like it's not it's good food made cheaply when it's done
Yes.
best,
For
right?
sure.
So you know, we could talk about like nutritional value and like all those sorts of things along with it, but I think that it's kind of worth exploring, you know, ways to expand the menu,
Mm.
you know, to include these different things. It's not just about soul food, right? Like you said, like
Yeah.
Indian, Middle Eastern, like all these, like there are too many types of cuisine in the world to just have chicken patties. Like,
Yes.
it,
And you can make stuff just as cheap as chicken patties.
yeah,
You just have to make it.
yeah, and I think that I think everybody would appreciate it, you know,
Yeah.
and
Come on.
just like and you know if you don't want to eat it, then go eat a PB&J. Just like I had to skip the banana pancakes at Vanguard just because they would like they would just fill the syrup vat with bananas, and that was
Uh
like
huh.
kind of repulsive to me. So it
Oh,
was like even if you just got syrup with no bananas, like it just tasted like bananas. Um,
gotcha.
so those were
Okay.
the days when I was like, well, I'm just gonna have butter on my pancakes. Like there's ways around it. You know,
Yeah, for
if you don't
sure.
want to eat it, then don't. But I feel like the majority of the members would like be thrilled to have an Indian food day or something like that, you know?
Yeah, especially after eating the same thing. So let me ask you this question. I feel like I know the answer, but I feel like there are people that are like thinking this. Is it okay for a white cook to try to do soul food, or to do Mexican food, or to do other cultures' food?
I think that since I'm kind of removing the like whole capitalist part of it right now, because this isn't, we're not talking about like Rick Bayless right now,
Right.
or like, or somebody who has like staked their entire career
Yeah.
on, another culture's like cooking,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
This is like,
No Paula Deen.
I mean, is butter an ethnicity? I don't know. But I think that, you have your volunteer cook crew and they're working off recipes or whatever. Like, I think it's fine for them to try and make these. It might take some practice,
Sure.
but I don't think that necessarily enters the like cultural appropriation debate.
Right.
To have like the cook crew make you some Indian food. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, I like to make Indian food.
Yeah, there you go.
I use Indian ingredients, Indian spices, and I don't think that I'm like appropriating their. I'm not saying that it's like my food or my culture.
Right.
I'm just like, I'm gonna get on this. I'm gonna get on YouTube and watch this video of like how to make this in a traditional way, and I'm gonna try to do it, and hopefully it tastes good. It usually does.
So what you're saying, Alex, is that you're available for drum corps to bring you on as a cook, the chef, if you will, because you're a good cook.
I have worked on cook trucks before during the summer. Just saying.
All right. For all those drum corps people that want a program coordinator, brass tech, and cook, we have a 3-in-1 over here with Alex. You're right. And I think a lot of us make other cultures' food, and then sometimes it tastes good and sometimes it doesn't. But like I said, I just learned from you that would go a long way for different cultures and ethnicities and races, of giving them like you said, a feeling of comfort or of home. So I don't want to say it's as simple as food, but it looks like that is something that you already have to work recipes and create food. So why not just try something like that? That's going to be the only thing drum corps change. They're going to listen to this and go like, that's it. We're just going to do food. Alex said it was okay. And then, but it's only going to be one day. They're going to do it on Juneteenth.
It's going to be Juneteenth. They're going to call it like Fried Chicken Friday or something. And it's going to...
Oh, gosh. And then the Blue Devils will have to release another announcement. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm not saying the Blue Devils would do that. But you're right, because we talked about it. They'll go, what? Taco Tuesday worked. Why can't we do Fried Chicken Friday? Well, you do Meatloaf Monday? And they go like, no. Anyway. Okay. So speaking about appropriation, and we talked a lot about Guardians last time, about sort of the hip-hop genre that they gravitated towards and used, and that we're going to come back to if we had season. This was submitted by someone. It's been said that white people, let's just say non-black people, need to intentionally integrate themselves more in places like inner city schools, neighborhoods, because for too long the onus has been on black people to integrate into areas they're not wanted. So we're talking about sort of the community aspect. That being said, how do you do that without erasing or co-opting black culture?
Is this equating like renting a house in a neighborhood with appropriating black culture somehow?
I don't know. I'm reading as it was written. I assume
I'm gonna pull it up on my phone since you emailed it, because I just need to see it with my own eyes again.
Right. And I don't think it's like, what's that movie where Warren Beatty ran as a president and he dated Halle Berry and then he started rapping and he wore like a do-rag.
Bullmoose?
Bullworth. I don't think people are thinking like, if I do that, is that co-op? Because that was, that's a whole different thing. I don't know if it's that, but I think there's. Let's use Guardians as example. Maybe talking about that. Was that erasing or culturally misappropriating, or was that just was it co-opting black culture, or how can a drum corps or a staff or whatever, Guardians says they're from Houston, but Lord knows every year they're from a different city. They just like, we're going to do this, and they did Kanye West, and they did all these things. How does somebody do something like that without stepping over the line of cultural misappropriation?
So it's kind of a complicated discussion, I think, because like when music exists in the public, anyone can listen to it, anyone can appreciate it, but it's when things start being done to kind of try to change it too much from its original context and to say, so I'm thinking of like when sorry, white women, to keep throwing you under the bus. I'm thinking of like when all these white women do like acoustic guitar covers of rap songs, right? And they like completely like strip all of the affect from that music, the intent behind the lyrics. And they're like,
Ben Folds did it too, so listen,
true, not just white women, just
people love Ben Folds.
Yeah, it's not just white women. It is just very often white women.
right.
With like a ukulele, which is like a whole other cultural appropriation discussion to have. But I think what typically happens where it crosses the line into cultural appropriation is when there's discussion over the music suddenly becoming legible because it's been adapted to that format, right? So it's like, well, I didn't really like Kendrick or like Kanye West, or like you can't understand what they're saying, but now I can hear all the lyrics and they're actually really good. It's like that sort of thing where you're saying that culture now has some value because you have passed it through this filter of whiteness. And that's kind of, when you and I were talking about judging before, I think one of the reasons that judges struggle with hip hop is because, well, at least in the context of how you arranged it, it wasn't if you had done cultural appropriation, they would have recognized it as music, right?
That is a horrible thing to say.
It's like, a true thing.
But that's the thing. It's like, wait a minute. You mean if I had whiteified it and whitewashed it, whatever, we would have got credit for it. But then at that point, it's like, then why are we even playing? Okay. Wow.
Yeah. No, if we had done cultural appropriation, yeah, they would have recognized it, right? They would have suddenly seen the value that was like missing, that was hidden underneath some layers before that they couldn't realize, right? They would have suddenly seen it.
Sure.
So that's kind of, I'm thinking back to like just this initial question about like, white people moving into places or whatever, the onus being on them to go into places, and how can they do it without co-opting Black culture. I don't think that participating or trying to participate in someone's culture, like say you move into like a Black neighborhood and they invite you to the block party or the barbecue or something, and you go, I don't think that's co-opting Black culture.
Sure.
I think that's like acknowledging and appreciating it and like attempting to participate in it in whatever capacity you can. I don't think that's, if they then went to it and then decided to make flyers or whatever and say like, oh, I'm going to have like a block party, and they like took all the things they saw from it and had a block party like for their white friends, and we're like, oh, we're doing a block party.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that just being around Black people means that you're like co-opting Black culture,
right?
Which is like kind of, the more I like read this question, it just reads that way. I'm sure they didn't intend it that way, but that's just how it reads.
Yeah, no, and I get it, and like I mentioned, nobody who sent any of these things or talked about it were like, well, like it was not in that type of attitude. It was generally like they generally want to help. And I think the best way to put it is they're worried about the perception of the white savior mentality, which is a legit thing. And, I think like one of my favorite things of the Chappelle Show is they make fun of the white savior with the Black mentor kind of, it's a golf movie, what is
sure,
it?
Bagger
that
Vance.
kind of thing. Yeah, Bagger Vance or Rudy or any of those other movies where the black guy who is in some menial job is offering advice and the white guy sees the light and wins and the black guy's applauding in the end zone for him. I mean, there's that genuine concern that like, how do I avoid being seen as a white savior? I genuinely want to help, but I don't want that. I don't want someone to think that I'm only, oh, leave it to a white guy to try and come and do his thing. Like people want to help. I think they're just worried about that label.
Well, I guess to go deeper in this, like, it kind of seems like, based on this question or this discussion, it's like the expectation that if a white person moves into a black neighborhood, that they're somehow going to try to alter it in some way.
Which maybe that's the stereotype, right? Like we're going to come in and we're going to gentrify your neighborhood. Maybe because they're thinking maybe I'm going to make it better. Well, better for them is, I mean, it could have racist undertones. It literally could be just like, I just don't like this. I'm going to clean it up. Just like what's happening in East Austin and all the prices going through the roof, and you have to go further and further east to actually get into what was East Austin because things are getting pushed, right? So, I mean, without having this person on here to explain what they meant, I guess there's a lot of us just going, well, maybe it means this, or maybe it's this. I think genuinely they're really concerned about doing and saying the wrong things when they're trying to come from a good place of trying to help and be understanding and be an ally.
Sure. Yeah, I think that there are plenty of ways for white people to move into black spaces without trying to like gentrify them and appropriate them, without expecting them to look in a particular way. My doctoral research is on Detroit, and I'm just thinking about the way that some of those neighborhoods have changed, have gone from being quote unquote undesirable to suddenly very expensive and pricing people out. And I guess what has typically happened there, I mean, it started with white people leaving the city starting in the 1950s or so. And then white real estate developers kind of moving into these neighborhoods that were in varying states of disrepair, businesses that had been shuttered and all of that. And now there's the attempt to kind of build things out. And it has like the grit of like being Detroit, right? So it's like you can be adjacent to like this toughness, but you can still go to the Starbucks on the bottom level of your apartment building. And then they're gonna, put up murals and stuff, and they're gonna gesture towards the people who lived there before, even though they priced them all out. Or maybe you'll get a street named after someone or something like that. So it's, I don't think that has to happen every single time. Like a white person moves into a neighborhood that's not primarily white, it is happening a lot, but I don't think it has to be that way.
Sure. Yeah. It's a like all of this, it's somewhat complicated on all sides, because I think there is for some, I'm not going to say even for most, for some people that want to help, there's a genuine fear of am I helping the right way,
Sure.
or am I attempting to do this the right way? Because I mean, we just don't know, and I say we because I'm not black, and so we just don't know that if what we're doing is, we might think it's right, but it may not be actually right, or it may not help, or it may have longer lasting repercussions that we don't see. Sort of like, we'll just put a high-rise apartment building in this neighborhood and it'll raise the property values and that'll be good for everybody. And then 15 years later, everyone has to move out because the property values are raised.
I mean, my kind of, I guess if you want to call it advice for that, is first and foremost, just like listen to black people. If you're worried about whether or not you're helping in the right way, ask. Find out the ways that help is needed. The funny thing about gentrification is that, like you said, it's complicated and it's not 100. Well, I think that we can agree that it's better if it is safe to walk down your street at night. Yep. I think that that's better than maybe fearing being like attacked or something like that. Mm-hmm. So we can't write off all of the effects that come with gentrification as bad. At the same time, it really sucks that it takes something like just like that kind of money investment for a city to suddenly deem a population worth protecting. And that's kind of the issue here, right? That even the positive, quote unquote, positive things that come from gentrification are like kind of a slap in the face. They're like,
because you weren't worth it before.
right. And now you got to be able to pay X amount of money to be worth it. Right.
And that goes back to access.
Mm-hmm.
Access and everything. Well, Alex, I was sent an email from a gentleman named Grant Stephen Knox. I rarely get emails, but I wanted to read it to you because he doesn't. He's a graduate teaching assistant at the University of Arizona.
Okay, yeah.
And he introduces himself. I'm Grant Knox, and I'm currently a master's student in musicology at the University of Arizona. I've also served as the grad teaching assistant for the Pride of Arizona Marching Band and teach brass visual with local high school groups. As a young African-American scholar and participant/educator in the marching arts, I just wanted to express my gratitude for this incredible episode. The insight and dialogue from both you and Alex was very much appreciated and encouraging, especially for someone who only marched a year of drum corps for many of the same, quote, accessibility issues you all discussed. He marched Blue Stars 2014. I've also presented at academic conferences on the music of Kanye West and always felt like his music lends well to the marching band idiom, so getting to hear the background behind the Guardians 17 show, as well as the capacity for hip-hop music in the marching arts, was something that's hit super close to home. And then he says, I'm a Spotify listener, I can't rate, but I definitely give it a 5-star rating. I'd really appreciate it if you keep addressing topics of inclusion and diversity and membership, show design, etc., and how that trickles down to the landscape of high school marching band. I'm not sure if he reached out to you, but I wanted to share that email with you. He very much appreciated.
Yeah, that's so kind.
Our discussion.
And nice to hear. He did. I think he added me on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's really cool to hear. Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'll forward it to you, but I wanted to wait because I figured we might talk again, just to kind of like, Alex is not crying, but I'm just kidding. No, I rarely get any emails. They're usually just text messages or whatever, but I thought this one was really cool because I don't worry about how many listens these get. I worry about, are the things quality things. We could just talk about fluffy drum corps for an hour and a half and like, oh, it's all great. But there are people behind it, and there's a whole lot of issues we need to talk about. So I thought I would end this podcast on a little bit of a positive note, a fan appreciating your thoughts and your wisdom. And hopefully this episode affects people in the same way. Hopefully people listen. I know that everyone's probably Zoomed and podcasted out, but this is more than just drum corps. This is our world, and whatever changes we can make to drum corps obviously will help the world in general. But do you have any final thoughts or anything? Who knows? You could come back for a part 3 in a few weeks. I don't know. That might be fun.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure we definitely solved racism this time. So
finally,
so there's not going to be a need for a part 3. I think that, again, I'm cautiously optimistic to see what happens, not just in drum corps, but what happens in the world. Because with kind of the direct action that people are taking, with the protesting that's happening, that is leading to like real meaningful policy change, I think that we're on the cusp of something really big. Like it's an exciting moment. I hope that everyone, from people listening to this to people who have been out in the streets doing the work, I hope that we all realize that it's only beginning, that it's going to take daily effort, to make changes, whether that's something small, like a person who's never said Black Lives Matter in any kind of public way doing that, or having conversations with your extended family, or bringing up issues of access, like at, your local school board or city council meetings. There's just so much work to do, and I think we're at a really exciting time to do it. So everyone needs to buckle up, put on your helmet, and get ready, because we have work to do.
Yes, that's the whole thing about how long the protests before this took long. I mean, this is 3 weeks for us, right? Like, this is nothing compared to what has gone on in the past. And in a lot of weird ways, the pandemic actually helps, because that means people are at home and they have the time to do this. This is the perfect storm for political, cultural, whatever change. Keep it going. Don't stop. I guess we'll talk at some point. When is the next Black holiday, Alex? Because I had Ogechi on MLK Day. I had you on Juneteenth, and
it's amazing.
2 times as a streak. Look, they're not on purpose. I would just like to clarify.
Sure.
You said about June 19th.
Shout out Ogechi Kazu. What's up, girl?
Well, thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. Welcome back to Providence, Rhode Island. I'm sure you are happy to be home from the West Coast, right?
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's humid, but but it's good to be back.
Right. Cool. Hey, well, thanks. Do you want to take us home with some cool inspirational quote or something funny or anything?
I mean, I guess we can just close with like that Desmond Tutu quote. Which is essentially, if you choose to be silent in situations of injustice, then you have chosen the side of the oppressor.
This episode of Sketchbook Podcasts was recorded in Austin, Texas, and Providence, Rhode Island, and was edited and produced by me, Daniel Montoya Jr., in Austin, Texas. Our logo is created by John Suh of Purpose Designs, and our music is provided by Epidemic Sound. If you enjoy Sketchbook, tell a friend about the show or share a link on social media. You can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you might find your review featured on a future episode. Got questions, comments, suggestions, or concerns? Email us at sketchbookpodcasts@gmail.com. It too could be featured on a future episode. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at SketchbookPod and join the Sketchbook community on Facebook at Sketchbook Podcast. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Sketchbook Podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. Thanks for listening.